हेलो एवरीवन। वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे अल्फ्रेड लॉर्ड टेनिसन की पोम यूलिसेस के बारे में। अल्फ्रेड लॉर्ड टेनिसन के बारे में हम पिछले वीडियो में डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, जिसका लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में है। चलिए डिस्कस करते हैं पोम यूलिसेस के बारे में। Ulysses, published in 1872, is one of the many poems in which Tennyson reworked a well-known myth from his own perspective. Tennyson's Ulysses begins from where Homer's epic left off. Homer's Odyssey, which has Odysseus, Ulysses in his later name as the central figure, describes the adventure of Odysseus after the Battle of Troy. Odysseus, cursed by Poseidon, had to wander for 10 years before he could return to his kingdom Ithaca and claim his rightful place as the king and rescue his faithful wife Penelope from her unwanted suitors. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus' very identity is linked to the crucial fact of homecoming, whereas in Tennyson's Ulysses, Ulysses seeks to escape Ithaca and its people. For Tennyson, Ulysses is not just the king of Ithaca but a restless spirit dissatisfied with limits and boundaries. Ulysses for Tennyson becomes the representative of the Victorian age. The Victorian age saw great progress in all areas of knowledge. Scientific discoveries helped industrial progress, and domestic life and methods held in high esteem in all sections of society, especially the middle classes, which benefited the most from them. However, progress in science in the areas of biology and geology, especially the Darwinian theories of evolution, caused a major upheaval in Victorian society. It took the Victorian belief in the biblical account of the origins of man as made in the image of God by suggesting that human beings had descended from lower life forms. Belief in the superiority of human beings was shaken by scientific theories. This was one of the causes of the religious controversies that shook Victorian England, upsetting the stable beliefs of most Victorians. A great deal of Victorian poetry thus veers between bombastic optimism and a stultifying despair or melancholy. If Ulysses' restlessness and quest for adventures is reflective of the robustness of Victorian optimism, backed by economic prosperity and colonial optimism, it is important to remember that it underpinned by his consciousness of his old age and his failing powers. The doubts that shook the foundations of the Victorian age, Tennyson's own losses, and his melancholic disposition are expressed in phrases such as though much is lost, and the poem's tone of nostalgia and loss. However, Ulysses in the poem insists on hoping in spite of losses and expresses a desire to move on in the face of death. This, for Tennyson, was the representative spirit of the Victorian age. The form that Tennyson uses in this poem is the dramatic monologue, which is a form which was popular in Victorian poetry. It was used extensively by Browning and was dramatic and objective in impact. A typical dramatic monologue has a speaker and a listener who does not get to speak in the poem. It dramatizes a specific situation and allows the speaker to reveal his character through his speech. Tennyson's dramatic monologue is different because the situation is not very dramatic, nor is the revelation of character important. Here, as one knows right from the beginning what Ulysses actually desires. However, there is a development in the poem as Ulysses moves from expressing his dissatisfaction about his present situation to coming to a decision about leaving his kingdom to his son and urging his crew to accompany him in his quest for action. The identity of the listener or the addressee is not very important in this poem, especially in the early stanzas where one feels that Ulysses does not really need a specific listener. The poem uses contrasting characters to strengthen its dramatic impact. Ulysses' dissatisfaction with Ithaca and his desire for knowledge are established in the poem by effectively contrasting them to Telemachus' stable efficiency and the fact that he would be well satisfied playing the role his father rejects. Ulysses is the hero of the poem, and though he shrugs his responsibility as king and as householder, the poem suggests that it would have killed what was vital in Ulysses. In spite of his oncoming age, the restlessness of spirit which opened up new horizons for the world, in that sense, his action is not viewed as just a selfish one of self indulgence but as the vital something which is the secret of human progress. Stanza 1. And little profits that an idle king by this still heard among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and dole unequal loss unto a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed, and know not me. I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I have enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that loved me and alone, on shore, and when through scudding drifts the rainy hides vex the dim sea. I am become a name for always roaming with a hungry heart. Much have I seen and known, cities of men and manners, climates, councils, governments, myself not least, but honored of them all, and drunk delight of battle with my peers, far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. The speaker in the stanza is Ulysses, the king of Ithaca and one of the heroes of the Trojan War. He is also the hero of the great Homeric epic Odyssey, which is a record of the adventure of Odysseus or Ulysses of the 20 years it took him to reach home, Ithaca, from the Battle of Troy. Whereas the epic is concerned with Ulysses' struggle to reach his home, to claim his kingdom of Ithaca and his wife Penelope, the poem begins with his dissatisfaction with Ithaca. Ulysses expresses his dissatisfaction with his peaceful life among the arid crags of Ithaca. Together with his old wife, he feels no satisfaction in administering his people. He calls them a savage race, indicating his distance from his own people. His subjects, who only know how to save up, eat, and sleep, do not understand or appreciate his eagerness for adventure. Ulysses here feels himself to be alienated from his own people in his thirst for adventure. His spirit is restless for more adventure and he wants to live life to its fullest degree. He has experienced both joy and sorrow to its maximum extent, whether with his friends or alone, on land or on troubled seas. He feels his identity has become synonymous with a thirst for adventure. He has learned a great deal in the course of his adventure about different lands and peoples and customs and has been honored by all of them. He has also enjoyed using his battle skills against his equals in the famous Battle of Troy. Ulysses is presented in these lines as a hero who has enjoyed an active life of battle, of adventures, and has learned from and enjoyed his experiences. His present life seems like a bondage to him, with its quiet peace and satisfied people with whom he cannot identify. Stanza 2. I'm a part of all that I have met. Yet all experience is an arc wherethrough gleams the untravelled world, whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use, as though to breathe were life. Life piled on life were all too little, and of fun to me little remains, but every hour is saved from that eternal silence, something more, a bringer of new things. And while it were for some 3 suns to store and hoard myself and this grey spirit yearning and desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bound of human thought. In the stanza, Ulysses assesses his experiences, claiming that his identity is made up of all that he has seen and experienced, and yet he says, experience has no end. It is like an arc through which one can glimpse other experiences which one has not explored, whose boundaries keep extending as one moves on and on. That is the life he wants for him to come to a stop, to mark a boundary. Is dull. Life a sword, he feels. He should shine and use and not be unused and rusting. Life for him is not merely being alive. He feels he has so much to do and know that a series of lives, life piled on life, is not enough for him. He is reminded of his age and admits that few years remain of his life. He wants to save every hour that he can from death, that eternal silence, to experience something more or something new, finding it's while to spend the last 3 years of his life saving and hoarding himself. His spirit, which he acknowledges as old, is yet passionate and yearns for knowledge, following it beyond human conception, beyond boundaries which are always receding. In this stanza, Tennyson defines that thirst for adventure as not just a yearning for physical activity, but as a thirst for knowledge. It is something that has no end, and the worst kind of existence for someone who wants this is to stop and waste oneself in idleness. Ulysses also recognizes that he is different from others and that he has a yearning for adventure in the last years of his life. His present situation as the king who has had a glorious heroic past and who now rules peacefully over his kingdom would satisfy ordinary men, but it makes him restless. He thirsts for more adventure, not for glory but for knowledge, which fascinates him because there is no end to it. Chapter 3. This is my son, my known Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter and the isles well loved of me, discerning to fulfill this labor by slow prudence to make mild a rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to be to the useful and the good. Most blameless is he, centered in the sphere of common duties, sent not to fade in offices of tenderness and pay, meet or adoration to my household gods. When I am gone, he works his work, I mine. It is in the first two stanzas that Ulysses expresses his dissatisfaction with his present condition, while in this stanza he comes to a decision. Introducing his beloved son Telemachus, he decides to leave his rocky kingdom of Ithaca under his care. Ulysses finds him mature enough to undertake the task of responsibility. Telemachus would, he feels, gradually and discreetly civilize the Ithacans, and when my laws manage to make them useful and productive citizens, he finds Telemachus blameless, approving his concentration on fulfilling the ordinary duties which are expected of him. He is fully conscious of his duties within the household too, love and respect to his family members and paying adequate respect to the household gods. Ulysses feels that Telemachus would fulfill his duties just as he should be allowed to do his own work. Ulysses comes to a decision in the stanza with the introduction of Telemachus. Telemachus, Ulysses' son, is he feels the right successor to the throne of Ithaca. He has all the qualities of an able ruler, together with the desire to be one. Ulysses defines his purpose in life as different from his son. The description of Telemachus is to Ulysses' advantage because though Ulysses admires his son, he would never be happy in Telemachus' position. Telemachus, with his responsible and careful abilities, is perhaps the prototype of the ordinary man, providing a foil to Ulysses, who is presented as the hero even though he is an aging one. Stanza 4. There lies the boat, the vessel puffs her sail. There gloom the dark, broad seas, my mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me. That ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine in a post. Free hearts, free foreheads, you and I are old. Old age hath yet his honor and his toil. Death closes all, but someday, ere the end, some work of noble note may yet be done, not unbecoming men that strove with gods. Ulysses feels that the port, the ship, and the very seas seem to be in wait for him. He addresses his sailors in this stanza, and for the first time in the poem, he is not presented as alienated but as one with his men. He calls them my mariners, which suggests a close relationship and a sense of belonging, something which he has never felt for his own subjects, calling them as a savage race and a rugged people in the previous stanzas. He feels his sailors have worked hard with him. They shared the same thoughts and had the capacity to cheerfully face both good and bad fortune. They too have grown old like him, but he urges them to join him because he insists that in old age it is possible to strive and to achieve results. Only death forecloses all possibilities and desires. But before death, it is still possible to do something worthwhile, which would be suitable of men who had the courage to fight with the gods. This stanza emphasizes the spirit of comradeship between Ulysses and his men. He might be a dissatisfied king, but he is a good leader of men who recognizes their worth and urges them to further adventures. He is still seen as struggling against old age, which he refuses to consider a disability. Stanza 5. The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes, the slow moon climbs, the deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off and sitting bell in order smite. The sounding furrows for my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the paths of all the western stars until it may be that the gulls will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great eagles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are one equal temper of heroic hearts made weak by time and fate, but strong and will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Ulysses describes the onset of the evening, the lights beckoning from the rocks, the long day ends, and the moon rises slowly. These lines, with the evocative visual and auditory images, are typical features of Tennyson's poetry. The second line of the stanza, for example, uses long stressed syllables. The OS sounds and AS and ES are stressed. Example in long day, waves slow, moon climbs steep. Thus, through sound images, Tennyson manages to evoke a sense of tiredness and melancholy, which also suggests that the evening he describes can be read as the evening of his life. Ulysses urges his friends on by reminding them that though it is the evening of their lives, it is never too late to search for new experiences. He asks them to begin the journey in a disciplined way. Striking the waves, he declares his purpose, which is to sail on into the western seas beyond where the sun sets and beyond where the stars set to continue. Whether search till he dies, he feels they might drown in the ocean deep, or they might reach the happy isles where he would be glad to meet Achilles, the great hero of the Trojan War. Ulysses, in the middle of his enthusiasm, is reminded of his present condition and he pauses to take account of his situation. He accepts that he has lost a great deal, but he insists that a great deal remains. And though he does not have his former power to shake the heaven and the earth, he still has pride in his present strength. They are one in their determination to face hardships, and though time and circumstances have weakened them, their will is strong enough which will urge them on to struggle, to seek, to achieve, and not to give up. The last six lines of this stanza are often taken as Tennyson's assessment of the Victorian age. Though the lines are spoken by Ulysses and are dramatically appropriate too, in that he urges his mates to continue in spite of the fact that they have reached the end of their lives. The Victorian age had begun on a note of great enthusiasm, but it was an age which was beset by major religious and economic controversies. Tennyson, as the acknowledged prophetic voice of the Victorian age, expresses both the doubts and disappointments as well as the hopes of the age in the quoted line. Though much is taken, much abides. Similarly, the last line of the poem, while applicable of Ulysses' specific situation, also articulates the Victorian optimism tempered by the recognition of loss and weakness. To seek after new knowledge and to carry on in spite of disappointments. Poetic devices. Alliteration refers to the repetition of the same letter or sound at the beginning of nearby words. Tennyson uses this technique throughout Ulysses. For example, consider lines 12 to 14 for always roaming with a hungry heart. Much have I seen and known, cities of men, and manners, climates, councils, governments. The alliteration in this passage is at once prominent and subtle. All three instances of the technique are sonically distinct due to the different qualities of the consonant signs, the bready H, the nasal M, the sharp C. Furthermore, not all the examples of alliteration are found in directly adjacent words. Tennyson has even used alliteration across line endings. The trio of H sounds in the enjambed phrase hungry heart much have offers a particularly unassuming example. Tennyson's use of alliteration in the poem has multiple functions. First, it has a sonic function, enriching the language and giving it a self consciously poetic sound. Secondly, it enhances the sound or sense of connections between individual words. The phrase hungry hearts, for instance, emphasizes the connection between the human spirit and the deep desire for knowledge and experience. Finally, alliteration offers has an ennobling function that enhances the inspirational quality of the speaker's words, as when he insists to his mariners, some work of noble note may yet be done. Line 52. Allusion. An allusion is a passing reference to a literary or historical person, place, or event, often made without explicit identification. Allusion plays a major role in Tennyson's poem, which concerns a mythic hero whose exploits are most notably recounted in the two epics of the Greek poet Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Ulysses takes place in the period following the Odyssey, which tells of the protagonist's 10-year struggle to reach his home in Ithaca after the end of the Trojan War. Yet, Tennyson's take on this legendary hero also alludes to another account offered by the Italian poet Dante Alighieri in the Inferno. In Dante's account, Ulysses never returned to Ithaca. Instead, he delivered an inspiring speech and convinced his crew to set out on a new voyage, during which they all perished. Tennyson retains Homer's timeline but echoes Dante's idea of one last fateful journey of exploration. In addition to these allusions, the classical and medieval text, Tennyson also alludes to two of Shakespeare's plays, Hamlet and Troilus and Cressida. Perhaps the most significant allusion is to Hamlet, which occurs in line 3 to 5. And meat and dole, unequal laws onto a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. Compare this language to Hamlet, Act 4, Scene 4, line 30 to 32. What is a man if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed? a beast no more. Enjambment and Kazura. Enjambment refers to a technique in which one poetic line flows continuously to the next without stopping. Many of the lines in Ulysses are enjambed, allowing one line to cascade into the next. Yet, the frequency of enjambment doesn't mean that the poem's language flows freely throughout. Indeed, Tennyson frequently regulates the flow and pace of the language with midline punctuation, which creates strong pauses and occasionally full stops. This type of strong pause within an individual line is known as caesura. Taken together, Tennyson's combined use of enjambment and caesura generates a subtly modulated rhythm. Indeed, the poet's careful management of these two techniques gives the language a textual complexity that sometimes approximates prose. As an example, consider line 6 to 11. I cannot rest from travel, I will drink. Life to the lees, all times I have enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that love me and alone, on shore, and when through scuddling drifts the rainy hides. Vex the dim sea, I am become a name. This passage consists entirely of enjambed lines. It also features two distinct types of pause, a shorter pause created by the comma and a longer pause created by the colon. Taken together, these two techniques break the line up in unpredictable ways that mimic the cadence of natural speech, yet the shifting dynamics of the verse might also be said to minor the speaker's sense of restlessness on the brink of a new voyage. Simile and metaphor. In addition to the speaker's various rhetorical flourishes throughout the poem, he also makes effective use of two basic forms of figurative language, simile and metaphor. Recall that a simile is a figure of speech that explicitly compares two unlike things to each other. A metaphor, by contrast, makes a more implicit comparison between two things. The speaker uses simile at the end of the first stanza, where he explicitly likens knowledge to a store. To follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bound of human thought. Though a bit cliched, this image nonetheless captures the speaker's aspiration to reach for something that by definition will be impossible to grasp. More original, perhaps, is the speaker's complex use of metaphor, yet all experience in an arc where through gleam that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. In this passage, Ulysses develops an intriguing metaphor for experience. He initially links experience to an arc through which the viewer can see the glittering ocean. This frame view then allows him to imagine a sailor's point of view as he sails towards the receding horizon. Taken as a whole, this metaphor implies that experience isn't just something that happened in someone's past. Instead, it's more like a lens that frames how a person sees the world and directs them towards new experiences. Themes. Meaning lies in the pursuit of achievement. Perhaps the most central theme in Tennyson's poem relates to the value of pursuit. Indeed, Ulysses as a whole may be read as espousing a philosophy of life where the most important meaning lies in the pursuit of achievement. The speaker first introduces this philosophy in the opening stanza. There, he frames all forms of idleness in negative terms. How dull it is to pause to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use as though to breathe were life. These lines reflect Ulysses' frustration with his life as king of Ithaca, where he does little more than preside over a community he derides for their idle complacency. It is an explicit judgment of his own people that the speaker declares with exasperation as though to breathe were life. Against this negative image of idleness, Ulysses offers his own hungry heart as an example of what life should really be about. Rather than rest of his laurels, Ulysses longs for new adventures. Such adventures will push him to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bound of human thought. Crucially, the pursuit of achievement is more important than the achievement itself. It may be impossible to reach that beyond, but the striving is itself noble, meaningful, and hence life giving. The primacy of the individual over the collective. For Ulysses, the will of the individual takes precedence over the needs of the collective. The team can be seen in the way the speaker dismisses other people while presenting his own personal desires as noble and all important. Consider how Ulysses talks about his family. He offers 11 lines of lukewarm praise for his son, and he devotes just 2 words to Penelope, his aged wife. He's similarly dismissive of his community, which he deems a savage race. Meanwhile, he spends 27 lines celebrating the adventurous life and another 26 lines exhorting his mariners to ready the sails for his next voyage. This imbalance clearly shows some egotism on the speaker's part. Most importantly, though, it demonstrates the extent to which he conceives of achievement as an individual pursuit. Ulysses doesn't consider his public service a real achievement, since all he does is meet and dole unequal laws that he had no hand in establishing. Furthermore, public service has an alienating effect since he remains distant from his subjects. To resist the alienation and lack of agency he feels as king, Ulysses must abandon his responsibility to the collective and reassert his individual will. Experience shapes the person. Ulysses has seen a lot in his life. Not only did he spend 10 years of his life fighting in the Trojan War, but then he went on to spend another 10 years struggling to make his way home. Ulysses recalls some of these experiences in the poem's first stanza, where he recalls the rainy heights and the ringing plains of windy Troy. His reason for making these references isn't simply to indulge in nostalgia for a time when he was young and active. Instead, he wants to emphasize the degree in which his experience has shaped him. As he puts the matter in lines, I'm a part of all that I have met. It all experiences an arc where through gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. This passage begins with a simple statement about how his experiences have made him the man he is, but Ulysses complicates this idea in the lines that follow, where he develops an intriguing metaphor for experience. The speaker links experience to an arc through which the viewer can see the glittering ocean and imagine what it's like to sail it. The metaphor implies that experience isn't just something that happened in someone's past. Instead, it's also a lens that frames how a person sees the world in the present. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको अच्छी लगी होगी। अगर अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माय चैनल एंड हमें कमेंट करके बताइए कि आप आने वाली वीडियोस किस टॉपिक पर देखना चाहते हैं। मिलते हैं कल एक और वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे।